Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about all of the books that I read in the month of October. I'm gonna have to just jump right in and start this video straight away because I have so many books to talk about this month. I read over 20 books. I think I read 21 books in the month of October, which is insane. And like now I'm sitting here and looking at this massive pile of books. I'm like, why did I do it? Like, what was the rush? And there is no rush. I was just finishing off a series I've been reading for ages. I was reading a lot of other books. I was listening to a lot of audiobooks that always kind of like increases the amount I read. And also I think I felt like some kind of like artificial rush to the end of the year for some reason, but I'm definitely gonna chill out in the next couple of months because now I'm back on track reaching my goal of reading 200 books in a year, which I've never done before. I've come very close. I've never actually done it, and I'm pretty much sure that I'm gonna hit it at this point unless I really don't read a lot in the next 2 months, but that's unlikely. I'm just gonna chill out for the next couple of months because I don't know how long this video is gonna be with me talking about 21 books. So with all that said, let's just jump right in. I'm doing it in order of my favorite books to my least favorite books. So if you prefer me being really harsh, go to the end of this video, but I'm going to start off with talking about the books that I absolutely loved this month. There was no 5 out of 5s, but I have 2 books that got pretty close to a 5 that I'd probably round up. But when I rate them on Storygraph, I'm giving them like a 4.5. If you saw my TBR video, I did actually stick pretty well to that. I haven't finished a couple of books that were on that, but most of these books were like kind of Halloween-y, kind of creepy, cozy vibes, which was really fun to read. I love seasonal reading. And we're kicking this off with one of my favorite books, or the favorite book that I read this month, and that is Wyrd Sisters by Terry Pratchett. This one was so much fun and it's my favourite of the Discworld novels so far. Lots of people in the comments have told me before that the Witches books are their favourite and that I would like them too, and you were so right because I really liked Equal Rights as well, but this one was just even better. I think it's just all of the Shakespeare that's in this. It's really making fun and also like poking fun and like having a lot of fun with all the Shakespeare references that are happening in this. If you're not familiar with Discworld, it is a huge long series of like 40 odd books by Terry Pratchett, and they're all set in the same universe but they follow different characters, and there's kind of like mini collections within the big series focused on specific characters. And I love the Witches. I already love them and I love them even more now. This one was just so fun. It had that whimsical vibe. It was just like nonsensical a lot of the time. The twists and like the dialogue and the words are just so funny and clever, and I just had an absolute whale of a time with this. It's so cozy as well, and I'm just so glad that I read it this time of year because it was just absolutely like perfect for like a Halloween-y read. And this one I rated 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm obsessed with these books. So I might try and read another Discworld next month as well. I need to see where I'm going to go next because like so far I've just been going in chronological order, which people do not recommend, but me and my friend Alice, we're both doing it, and so far we've really loved it. So I think next chronologically is Pyramids for me, so I don't know if I actually own that one. I do, I've just checked, I do own that one, so maybe I'll read that next month. But yeah, that was a 4.5 for me. And next up, the other book that also got 4.5 stars this month, and this one kind of surprised me. It didn't and it didn't, but I just absolutely loved it, and the book is The Bandit Queens. I've heard loads of really good things about this book, but I do feel like it's kind of slightly under the radar as well. Like everyone who reads it really likes it, but then like it doesn't get as much attention as I think it deserves. And I was just really like blown away by this one, and I really wish I read this one when I was reading the Women's Prize long list last year, because this one was longlisted but it wasn't shortlisted, which is a shame because honestly it was incredible. I also actually listened to this as an audiobook and the audiobook was fantastic. But basically this book is all about Gita, and she lives in this village where everybody knows everybody else's business, and when her husband disappears everybody thinks that she is the one that killed him. But she doesn't really mind because being a single woman in this society poses a lot of danger, so if people think that she's dangerous herself, then she's kind of left alone. But then one day one of the other women in the community come to her and they want her to help them kill their husband. So then she's in this position where she has to kind of like either come clean and tell this woman that she didn't actually kill her husband, or she has to go along with it and help this woman get rid of her abusive husband. While this book does deal with like a really dark subject matter, it's really funny, and especially the dialogue absolutely had me really laughing because Gita is such a funny character, and her interactions with the other women, especially like her frenemy, was so toxic, but also like you can tell that they actually really do still kind of care about each other. This book is plotted really well, it's exciting, it's a thriller, and while it is funny, it also just has like this real nice heart to it, and I really loved the message at the core
being all about female friendship and solidarity and coming together. Honestly, I just cannot recommend this one enough. I absolutely loved it. If you like thrillers, I just wholeheartedly recommend this one. It was so much fun. Next up, I have a book that I read on my Kindle that I don't physically own, and it is the Empusium. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Like, correct me if I'm saying this title wrong. I've seen it pronounced a few different ways. I'm saying the Empusium. But this is the new book by Olga oh my god, how do you say her name? Olga Tokarczuk. Even having looked up the pronunciation, I'm sure I'm absolutely butchering that, so I'm sorry about that. But this is my second book by this author, and I also really, really enjoyed this one. I didn't enjoy it as much as her previous one, which was Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead, but I do just think that's because of subject matter and like preference over like main character. But this book's kind of subtitle is a health resort horror story, and that it is. It's very creepy, it's very atmospheric. It's following a group of young men as they are going to this health resort deep in this basin in these mountains in order to help cure their respiratory diseases. It's thought that the air there is like especially good for helping people recover from TB. So you're mainly following this young man as he is meeting this group of men basically as they're all staying in the same guest house. A lot of this book is very slow, but there is such a huge sense of like atmosphere, and it feels really oppressive and very creepy, even though there's kind of nothing you can put your finger on of why it feels so off. But it builds and builds and builds as you go throughout this story. In terms of the plot, a lot happens in the last section. I obviously don't want to spoil because it is a really good ending. Most of the story is actually just following these different conversations that these men are having, and actually it's like an incredibly well researched book. I read in the author's note at the end, all of the ideas that the men are discussing are like written down and stated ideas by like great scientific, philosophical and political thinkers at the time. But these conversations to read are actually incredibly difficult because they are so sexist. They just come down to a lot about how women are just absolutely useless in every single way. But it is kind of interesting to see these conversations being put into context and these ideas explored by these like so-called intellectual men, because these men, being very well read, would have picked up these ideas by other people who are now thought to be great thinkers like Charles Darwin. So while this book was quite painful to read, I do think the payoff was there and I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead. So that one is like a high 4 stars for me. Next up we have Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I was really pleasantly surprised with this one. For some reason I thought I was going to really struggle to get back into this world. This is a sequel to Ninth House that I read, I'm gonna say like 4 or 5 years ago, and I did have to look up some stuff, especially about like all the different secret societies that are going on. But really this book just dragged me straight in, and I sometimes worry that like waiting so long for a sequel it's just never gonna like live up to it, but this one was actually really good. Basically in the world of Ninth House you are following Alex Stern, and she has grown up in a very troubled environment, and she has always been able to like see and interact with ghosts, but no one's ever believed her. And then at the very lowest point of her life she gets offered the chance to go to Yale, where she gets inducted to their secret society, and the purpose of the secret society is to kind of police the other secret societies and make sure that no one does anything too drastic against the rules. There's just so much in these books. They are fantasy, but they're really dark academia. There's commentary on like wealth and class and status. There's always a central mystery going on. There's lots of magic. There's lots of research. I just had a lot of fun and I really enjoyed this one, so that was a 4 star for me. Next up we have a book that I just finished last night and I also gave 4 stars, but I'm not sure if this will stay 4 stars. I'm not, because I only just finished it, so I'm still like kind of thinking about where this is going to go. But that book is All's Well by Mona Awad. So this one I think is like one of her least like critically acclaimed out of Rouge and Bunny and then this one, but I really enjoyed it. This book is all about Miranda, who was a famous theatre actor. One day she had an accident where she fell off the stage and basically she never managed to recover, and then has since suffered with daily intense chronic pain. So she is now teaching as a theatre director at a liberal arts college, and she's trying to put on a production of All's Well That Ends Well, but the students kind of don't want to do it. They want to do something more exciting. And then one day something happens to Miranda and basically her pain kind of miraculously disappears. This book is classic Mona Awad in terms of like there's a very like morally grey, unlikable main character. It's literary fiction. There's a healthy dose of like horror and magical realism. You never know quite what is real, what is imagined, what's being dreamt about. And overall I really enjoyed this book. I think it's a great commentary on female pain and like misogyny in trying to get a diagnosis and in the medical community. So that was another 4-star read from me. And then next up we have a 4-star read, which is a good rating, but for me personally I felt a bit let down by this book, which is a little bit upsetting. I think I went in with incredibly high expectations and I thought it was going to be a new favourite, and then it wasn't. And that book is
Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So I was a little bit disappointed in this book, unfortunately. And I honestly think that it comes down to something I read after I'd finished the book, which helped me explain like why I didn't like the book maybe as much as I thought. So this book is set in the 1800s in England, and magic is a dying art. There are a few kind of magical scholars around, but no one really practices magic anymore like they used to, until the scholars of the world discover Mr. Norrell, who is the last remaining practical magician. And he eventually comes out of his hermit cave of a library. He starts to do magical feats that astound the world. It's helping England in the war against Napoleon, and all is well until another magician emerges seemingly from nowhere, who is the exact opposite of Mr. Norrell in every way, and that is Jonathan Strange. So this book is about these two men, these two magicians, and their friendship and their rivalry. And of course it is wonderfully written. It is so atmospheric. It just really fun to read this during the autumn time because of how much I felt that I was living in the world of the book. It's very long. It feels like a real journey of a book with these characters. My main issue, despite all the good things about this book, and I love the characters and I love the way it was written, but my main issue is just that it didn't seem like there was a plan. And I afterwards read something that Susanna Clarke had said, and she basically said that she went in not having a plan. And I think you can tell. I think maybe I'm spoiled by things that are kind of meticulously plotted and have a good payoff, because for me, this personally did not, unfortunately, have that payoff. There is so much time spent on specific things that then don't matter at all. And I think I was too focused maybe on like unraveling the mysteries myself, kind of imagining how things are going to unfold, that when it went in a complete different direction and when certain things just never came up again, I was a bit disappointed. If you like really in-depth character studies, if you love like moody atmospheres, if you like books with illustrations, then you probably will love this book. And I can actually see why it's many people's favourite, but just for me, it can't be. And it's like a 4 or maybe like a 3.75. I've honestly never heard anyone say a bad word about this book, and I think maybe it's just me. Next up, we have a couple more 4 stars, but these are kind of like lower 4 stars, like maybe 3.75 that I'm rounding up to a 4 star. Like these kind of are in order. The next book I want to talk about is Fruit of the Dead by Rachel Leon. This book might win an award for prettiest book that I own because I'm obsessed with the art of this cover. I absolutely love it. This book, overall, my thoughts are it was really good, it was really fun, but I'm just not sure it'll stay with me. But let me tell you a little bit about it. This is actually a Persephone and Demeter retelling. So obviously you have Persephone and Hades, but this is mainly about Persephone and Demeter, so Persephone and her mother, but set in modern day. And honestly, for a retelling, I really loved it. I loved how this was modernized. So in this book, you're following Corey, who is newly 18 and she doesn't know what to do with her life, and she's currently working as a camp counselor. And then when she gets the opportunity to work as a babysitter for a man who's described as a world shaker, she jumps at the chance and then is taken to his private island and forced to sign an NDA. And she lives there in this life of like absolute luxury, caring for these children, but also having a very strange and kind of toxic but magnetic relationship with the father. Meanwhile, Ema, her mother, is the CEO of an agriculture company that is trying to end global starvation. And she is highly strung and very highly protective of her daughter. So then when she goes missing, she makes it her mission to drop everything to find her. I loved how this ancient myth was brought forward. I think that there was so many allusions to the original were done in a really interesting way, and I especially loved like the Demeter Ema character. My only issue is that just it was necessary for Corey or Persephone to be so young. For me personally, just reading the perspective of a very incredibly naive 18-year-old at times is a little bit grating, because you're just like, what are you doing? This is terrible. You know it's terrible. Why are you doing this? But that's more my thing. It was written very well, and I think it's just a really interesting way to redo that myth while it's a commentary on capitalist society and like the really complicated mother-daughter bond, all of which I really love. So next up, I want to talk about a series that I've just finally managed to finish, that I've been rereading. I've just for some reason stopped reading it last year, and I've just finally finished it. So I read the final 5 books in this series, and that series is
A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. These are such fun books. I'm putting them all together here because I can't talk in detail about this series, obviously about the plot, and also they were all between like a 4 and a 5 for me. I read number 9, which is The Carnivorous Carnival, number 10, The Slippery Slope. These are out of order, hold on. Number 11, The Grim Grotto. Number 12, The Penultimate Peril, and then final book, The End. These are just so much fun. I really, really love this book series. They are so nostalgic to me. I loved reading them as a child. I think they honestly shaped a lot of my personality. They're witty, they're full of hearts, they're full of twists, they're nonsensical. Couldn't remember a lot actually of how they truly end. And honestly, I'm kind of still like, I really kind of want to talk about how the actual last one ended. So if anyone's read these recently, I'd actually love to discuss it. Out of these 5, my favourite one was The End, despite like, I don't know, like there's some stuff that I wasn't like 100% happy with. And then my second favourite was The Grim Grotto as well, which I thought was so much fun, and I remembered quite a lot of that one actually. So that is the end of my reread of the Series of Unfortunate Events. They've been so much fun. It's taken me longer than I thought, but this is the reason why I've read so many books this month, because they really don't take long to read. So another book that I've read that I'm just putting right in the middle of this video because I'm not rating it, because I've done an entire vlog and I don't want to talk about it until that vlog is up, is that I read Manacled, which is a Harry Potter fanfiction. Like I said, I have a whole vlog where I'm going to go into in depth all of my thoughts about this, all of my reactions. That is coming up soon. So I will not be talking about it here. So I'm going to put it bang in the middle of this video so you don't know if I'm rating it high or low. Next up, we have a book that I gave almost 4 stars, and that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This one I would say I was a little bit disappointed in, just because usually I do love T. Kingfisher, but this one I still really enjoyed. I just think maybe it wasn't long enough for me to like be completely obsessed with it. And also I've read similar things I think were done slightly better, or maybe they just did it first. But basically this is a retelling of the House of Usher, and you are following Alex, who is a retired soldier, because they get a letter saying that their friend is dying. So they arrive in this decrepit house that is falling apart around them, and from there we proceed to have a very creepy and haunting tale. Just unfortunately I think that it was quite obvious what was going to happen in the end. The reason why I pushed this up to a 4-star rather than like if it's very predictable it would be like a 3 or a 2 is because I loved like the additional world building that was going on in this book. There was so much depth to the main character's backstory that just like almost wasn't needed, but just really added a lot to me. Also, I love fungal horror in general. Like I will always read like a mushroom horror. It was gross, it was creepy, and it was fun, but it wasn't life-changing. So next up we have a couple of 3.5 stars, and this one I talked about a little bit in a recent vlog, but I read Tropic of Serpents, or The Tropic of Serpents. This is the second book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, and I just love these books because they have such cool illustrations in. I don't think these are spoilers, but obviously these books are all about dragons. If you saw my recent video on light versus dark academia, these are light academia, and you are following Lady Trent, who is trying to make her way in a very sexist world to be the leading expert in the study of dragons. This book is the second book, and you follow Lady Trent as she goes to a brand new place, a brand new culture, and trying to find some new dragons. I rated this 3.5 stars. I really enjoy these books. They're so much fun. I think for me the issue with this book though is that there just wasn't quite enough dragons, because half of these books are about her professional career and like dragons, but then half of them are mostly about Lady Trent herself kind of learning different social customs and like learning lessons. And I did really enjoy, like there's a part in this book where she really learns a lesson about the way that she has been treating people, and they're kind of my favorite bits so far, where we get these kind of like humbling lessons for our main character. Definitely carrying on with this series, and I've heard that actually things get even better from the 3rd book onwards, so if you think that too, then let me know. Next up I read a book that is, I don't think out yet, but I read it as a digital copy, and this is going to be probably incredibly niche, but I read The Cult of the Lamb, which is a new graphic novel that is coming out, and this is actually based on a game that I play and love, where you play the game as a little innocent lamb who's about to be sacrificed and then gets the chance to come back to life if they start a cult. The game is really fun. This book was really fun. I gave it 3 stars though, because I feel like it did add a fun backstory, but I wasn't like completely obsessed. Like because I love the game, I liked this, but I don't think that I would like recommend this to many people unless they're like huge fans of the game. Next up, we're dropping down into the 2 stars. This is a 2.5 star, and this is another one I was disappointed in because I thought this could be like a new favourite for me, but unfortunately it was a 2.5, and that is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. This one, I'm so surprised that so many people absolutely love this. Basically, this book is about a young man who is interviewing a vampire. And this vampire is just going through and telling him the story of his entire life. You never know really why he's telling this story. Maybe that's answered in next books. I think this is actually a series. But I was really enjoying this book for like the whole first third. There's this really interesting relationship between the two vampires in this book that I was hoping was going to go in a certain direction or deepen in some way. And I was really intrigued with the psychological and like the philosophical questions of this vampire. Like what does it mean to be a vampire? But honestly, it lost me when it went a bit weird in the middle. Basically, there is a 5-year-old girl who's turned into a vampire and people are really, really weird about it. I don't understand why she had to be 5 years old. I don't understand why we had to go there with her story. Obviously, she never grows up, despite the fact that inside her own head, she is a grown woman living in the body of a 5-year-old. The relationship there is really odd. I didn't like it at all. I am intrigued by the TV show of this because I wanted to read this first, but I think that the TV show goes in a complete different direction, which I will be very pleased about because it could have been so much more. But why is it about this 5-year-old? Oh, it was really gross. I didn't like it at all. So that is Interview with a Vampire. Next up, we have the book club book that we read for October. We read for Bahrain this month. If you're interested in joining the book club, then there's always a link in the description to join. We've just decided what book we're doing for November, and I'm going to be reading that very soon. We read a different book from a different country every single month. We talk about it in the book club. It's a great time. And for October, we read The Pearl Thief. This is a tiny little, very skinny book. I think it's only 30 pages long, and it's a short story about a man who, after losing his job, decides that the only way that he can provide for his family is to become a pearl diver, despite the fact that he's not able to swim. This was like a very easy, quick read. I'm not actually sure what the point of it was though. At the beginning, I thought it was going to kind of be a commentary on class and poverty in Bahrain, but ultimately with the way that the story ended, I wasn't sure that that was the point at all because we kind of like didn't really go anywhere with it, and kind of like the entire thing was like flipped on its head. If you've read it, I think you know what I mean. It was written well, there were some beautiful lines, but overall nothing that was inspiring. So I gave that 2.5 stars. A book that I gave 2 stars, unfortunately, that I thought was going to be higher, and I think I'm going to give it 2.25, is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This one for a long time has been the lowest rated book on my Goodreads, and so I really wanted to see why, and most of the time when I was reading this book, I didn't understand why, because I thought it was really good. It's just one thing that happened at the end, and I was like, I know that this is going to happen, and I don't want it to happen. And then it did happen, and I was just really annoyed by it. Basically, it was kind of a cheap way for the book to end and the consequences to happen, and I just didn't like it. It started off really good. I was going to rate it like well over 3, like maybe into the 4, and then it just dropped down to like 2.25 by the end. But basically this book is about Lucy, who is recovering from a very bad breakup, and she is staying in her sister's house on the coast. She's having to do group therapy about dating and love, and she's not allowed to be dating anyone. But then when she keeps walking along the beach at night, she gets into conversations with this swimmer who is really attractive and really into her, and she's kind of trying to pick up all the pieces of her life and put herself back together again. And I really liked all of the commentary on like love and dating and obsession. It reads really quickly, it's well written, it's like funny, and the main character is just like terrible, but I just really didn't like the ending in so many ways, and I think it like cheapened a lot of the previous bits for me. So this was like a 2.5 or a 2.25 star. And now we're getting into the 1-star category. Firstly, I'll just talk about this one really quickly because the next book I want to talk about I'm going to rant about. This one was just a tiny book that I picked up, and it was just like not very good. This is just a book by Jay Rayner, who like writes restaurant reviews. This is one of the books that he put out. It's really old at this point, I think. Like that's the reason why I didn't like it. They're really old reviews and I just didn't care. Most of the restaurants are already closed that don't exist, and I just thought there's not enough there for it to be a book, and it was like a 1.5 or 1 star. But the worst book that I read this month, and the book that I want to rant about, if I can even be bothered to talk about this book, is A Novel Love Story. I hated this book. After reading a lot of like creepy books and like kind of more serious ones and literary fiction thrillers, I was really in the mood just to read like a light fluffy romance. And, like last month I read like the pumpkin spice one, and that was kind of shit, but it was still fun. And this one has just come out, and lots of people have really raved about this author's previous book, The 7-Year Slip, so I thought, oh, I'll read this one, it sounds fun. But it really wasn't fun. I hated this book. It just didn't make any sense, but the main issue is the main character was just such an idiot, and she was so mean to everyone around her. Okay, so essentially the premise of this book is that our main character is obsessed with this romance book series. The author unfortunately died before the last book could be finished, but she's in a romance book club, and every year they kind of do a trip and they get together and they talk about the books, and she's had a terrible year. She's on her way to this book club and basically gets stuck in this storm. So she pulls over into this small town in the rain and she almost runs over a man, and then her car breaks down and she stays the night with the man who she almost ran over and who she is incredibly rude to. And basically it very quickly turns out that she has arrived somehow into the small town of the book series that she's obsessed with. Firstly, it takes her quite a long time to figure this out, which doesn't really make sense because she rereads and reads. She basically only reads these romance books. All the characters are the same and all the buildings, the town is exactly as it's described in the books. And so at first she's like so incredibly happy about this, and then she like goes around and like meddles with these people's lives in like really mean ways. Like she tries to help the characters by really bluntly telling them that they're giving up on their own life to like be with someone that they shouldn't be with. And then when people get like justifiably angry with her for like meddling, she just like lashes out even more because she's not treating anyone like they're a real person. So she just comes across terribly. And she's also incredibly horrible to the main love interest as well. The point of no return for me with her was when she physically assaulted him. Like she slaps him across the face, and then she does briefly think, oh, maybe that was a bit far, like slapping a stranger across the face in the middle of the street. But like, I'm not going to apologize because he said something slightly rude to me. And then she like makes him beg her for an apology. It's just all so weird. Also, like the whole thing just didn't really make sense. And then in the end, like it's just so, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it in case you want to read it, but actually I am going to spoil it. You can just skip ahead if you don't want to read this, or just click off the video. Basically, they end up falling in love, of course, because it turns out he's not a character from the books. Like she's trying to figure out who he is. He is another real person. He's actually the fiance of the dead author, which wild. Like why? Anyway, so they have this like romance over a few days, and then they're deciding to leave and kind of travel the world together and like rejoin the real world. But then a new character comes to the small town, and this character is supposed to represent like the author's self-insert, and the guy that she's been like having this romance with locks eyes with this new character and just decides to stay and just like doesn't leave with her, and then he's gonna like have a go with it with this new character, like based on one glance. So then she just leaves, and it's supposed to be like, oh, like that's fine, but it's like, I thought you loved him. And then anyway, she goes, opens up her own bookshop, and then like eventually ages later he like shows up one day and he's like, yeah, it didn't work out with her, let's be together. And she's like, yay, and then they get together, and that's it. That's the very end. It's really bad. It's not written well. Obviously I hated the main female character, but the main male love interest was a blank sheet of paper. He had nothing, no discerning character qualities either. And the entire concept didn't make sense. Like it wasn't cute. Anyway, I gave this 1.5 stars. I can't believe I finished it, to be honest. I just shouldn't have bothered. But like, I was just really in the mood for like a cute, cozy story, and everyone was raving about this one, but honestly, don't bother. Next month, I'm going to try the Abby Jimenez books because I've just heard so about them, and I'm hoping that that's going to scratch the itch that I've been feeling. So anyway, I think that is the 21 books that I've read in the month of October. My throat is hurting. I've been talking for a very long time. Before I end this video, let me just show you the couple of books that I am currently reading. Firstly, I am reading Independent People by Haldor Laxness. I'm only about like a few chapters into this, like maybe 5% into this. It's quite a long book, and this is an Icelandic kind of classic. So far it's all about this man and his sheep, and I think that's going to be most of the book, to be honest, but it's about like striving for independence. It's very slow so far, so I think it'll take me a while, but that is a current read. And then the other one I'm currently reading is this book by Naomi Novik that I've just been absolutely loving. I've been really slowly reading this one because I'm kind of savouring it. This is a short story collection. There are stories from all of Naomi Novik's like series. There's ones from like the Spinning Silver World and Uprooted, and also the Scholomance series. So far my favourite story has been from the Scholomance series, but I'm only about like 40% through this one as well. But I'm really, really loving it. So they're the two that I'm currently reading. And that is everything that I have read and I'm reading in the month of October. Please let me know if you've read any of these books. I'd love to know, or if you're going to pick up any of the books now after I've told you about them. Overall, the standard was very high for this month, despite having a few misses, and we didn't add any to my favourites. But not every month you can get a 5-star read. Let me know down in the comments your favourite book that you read in the month of October, because I'd love to know. Remember to like this video and go and watch all of my other videos, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!